Question 6, part C, asked to state whether the null hypothesis should be rejected with a reason. And just to recap, the null hypothesis for this data collection experiment, I guess, is that the infection is independent from the hospital ward. The null hypothesis is always that two variables are independent, and in our case our variables are hospital ward and infection, likelihood of infection. Okay, the key rule to remember here is that if your chi-squared value, which is we found that out in part B, is greater than the critical value, you reject the null hypothesis. Now I just want to talk about the chi-squared statistic for a second. It is a measure of how dependent the two variables are. So the higher the number, the more dependent they are. So it kind of makes sense that if it's greater than this critical value, almost this like threshold, then the greater it is, the more we can reject the null hypothesis that the two variables are independent. Okay, so this is the rule. Start out just by remembering it, and then over time as you do questions it'll make a bit more sense. Okay, we have a big chi-squared value, therefore there's less chance of the two variables being independent. Now we have a chi-squared value of 8.21. We found that out in part B, and the critical value is 7.815. We were given that in the question. Now, is 8.21 greater or less than 7.815? It is greater than. So therefore, reject the null hypothesis. Just to recap, our chi-squared is greater than the critical value, therefore we reject this null hypothesis. And that is the answer to part C, question 6.